if I had any brains, politics pays less. And some people do very well with it, but it pays less. It's more aggravating. You're on call 24/7, but you do it because you love it, and it really makes a difference.
Maybe you could even talk about your background and then the world of polling.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's such a basic question for you, but just for the benefit of the listeners.
Well, I'm an old man at this game. I've been doing it for a while, where I used to volunteer for campaigns in the 70s. And I volunteered when I was in college for Reagan's 76 campaign in New York. And then in 80, I was volunteering campaigns. And during the time, I got to meet a person named Arthur Finkelstein, who was one of the major, he was very young at the time, one of the major national pollsters across the country. In fact, when he worked for Senator Helms in 76, he had actually helped save Reagan's campaign after they lost 6 primaries straight. They were able to win North Carolina, and that saved Ronald Reagan, saved his political career. So I ended up working for him in 1982, where before that I'd gotten my MBA in finance, quantitative methods. I had a business background. I was working in banking and finance, but Arthur knew me from volunteering for different races, including D'Amato's, and he offered me a chance to make my hobby a living. And what was great about it was Arthur always said, it was great to be a witness to history. Wow. And I've certainly, in a lot of these races, when you think about it, the difference we have made for the world.
It's so true.
I mean, when you think about Donald Trump, by the way, remember, Donald Trump endorsed Bob Turner in that race.
That's right.
And I've known Donald Trump for years. I mean, he did look at running in 2011. He was looking at running in the 2012 race, and he decided not to. Right. We did get him to help Bob Turner in the special in September. But when you think about the difference that it makes that Donald Trump won this election, this past presidential election, that Prime Minister Netanyahu was able to win his election. I mean, the world would have gone in a very different direction had these leaders not won their election. So it really matters and makes a difference. And when you think of the kind of I guess it's almost awe-inspiring when you think about the difference that people can make when they're doing the right things, and
such a beautiful point.
Millions of people in America.
Such a beautiful point. It's when God gives someone the opportunity to use their talents to make a difference,
right.
And there's nothing wrong with getting a paycheck doing it. Nothing wrong. No. It doesn't. It could be altruistic, but to make a difference is really it adds.
I will tell you on that point. I mean, we still do. My brother Jim and I run our polling firm, McLaughlin Associates. We have a website, McLaughlinOnline.com. Half our work is not political. Half of it's corporate.
So that's important to know.
And it's for major corporations across the country. I mean, we've worked for Verizon Fios. We've worked for Smithfield. We've worked for large, Pfizer. We've worked for healthcare companies. But those surveys are about making money. They have nothing to do with politics. Where if that corporate client's market share goes up 1%, they're ecstatic because they make a lot of money and it's real money. And those surveys, those market research surveys, if they pay better, they demand less, but people will take the information because what you're really selling is strategic information and knowledge.
Right.
And they'll take those surveys and they'll say, this is wonderful. And if I had any brains, politics pays less. And some people do very well with it, but it pays less. It's more aggravating. You're on call 24/7, but you do it because you love it, and it really makes a difference.
It makes a difference. Well, and of course, it gets the adrenaline rush a lot more.
Absolutely.
My guest this evening is none other than John McLaughlin, CEO. A lot of accolades, but CEO of McLaughlin Associates, pollster, political strategist. What am I missing? Missing a lot.
I just do my job for my clients. That's all.
Man, now you talked about that before. Let's go back to the political side. You've on the national side. You've done governor. I mean, you've done every type of race imaginable. Right. Perhaps you could share what you could share.
Right.
A great anecdote or two. I mean, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Jeb Bush. I mean, Donald Trump. You got to have some good stories.
Well, there's been times the polls are not always great, and you have to. I always try to be truthful with my candidates or clients. I'd rather call them candidates because they, over the course of the campaign, they tend to be friends, but they're really serious about winning the election. And you don't always deliver good news. Sometimes you have to deliver surveys that are not so good news. Like one time, Governor Schwarzenegger, we won the special election. It was historic. The field was over 130 candidates, and and he ended up winning that special election. But then he decided to make reforms, and in one of his budgets, he cut education. And I was telling him, I was saying, and Maria, his wife, was a good advisor, close advisor of him. And I was saying, can't we cut something other than education? The teachers union has a lot of money, and they will use that money to attack you. And and he was they did it, and the teachers union ran tens of millions of ads to beat his referendums, and one of them was to take away union dues from the forced union dues, so they wouldn't have that kind of money to do it. But they did it. And I'm telling him, I said, you don't want to do this. We want to do some compromise to get you reelected. And he's like, no, polls are like, because his negatives have gone up over 40%. In California, they'd really spent a lot of money. And he's like, polls are like muscles. You have to pump them up every now and then.
It's funny he said that.
And he says, and he's telling me, nobody likes a movie if everything's going along nice and smooth and you have high variables.
Can't argue with him on that.
It has to be some drama. And I'm like, no, you can't do that. And but he ended up doing a very good job, got reelected, and he was a historic governor. And for Prime Minister Netanyahu, I've worked for him for a number of years, for a long time, and the last election was certainly historic in that our president had organized an opposition to him and tried to beat him
within Israel,
with the super PAC
and on American dollars.
Yes, they used American tax dollars. The Senate found that out. It's very underreported over here. Yeah. And they talk about Russian meddling. Yeah. Barack Obama actually meddled in the Israeli election on March 17th in 2015.
Against official laws.
Yeah, yeah. And the Prime Minister, they called me to go over. It was like December 2015. He called an election. He calls an election. He's in second place. I'm like, who calls an election when you're in second place? and he says, well, the government had to change or whatever. I'm like, okay. We'll figure out how to win. When's the election? He says March 17th. I'm like, don't you have a parade over here on that day? I mean, me being from New York. Because he would tell people he's the smartest Irish pollster I ever met. And I'm like, how many you got over here? I thought that was a compliment. He grew up in Philadelphia, so he's very pro-American. His dad had taught in Philadelphia, so but really, when you think about it, he's one of the most brilliant people I've ever worked for, and what he has done for Israel and the world to speak out in the truth. Because during that campaign, he got invited by Speaker Boehner, to address Congress.
The famous,
and the Prime Minister could have gone along with Barack Obama. He could have gone along with some crazy stuff that our president was. Yeah. Remember when they first met, President Obama was talking about rolling back to the 67 borders, which they can't defend, was talking about granting any Arab the right of return into Israel, which would destroy it, and splitting Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Where, when I saw him in December 2014, he was saying, I told him I had to go back because my wife expected me to go back for Christmas. And he said, he says, he's trying to keep me to stay. And I said, well, can I go to Bethlehem? He says, no, you can't go there. I can't keep you safe. They're giving it back to the Palestinians.
Now, you've also worked with many other international figures and races. And one of them was Stephen Harper of Canada. Maybe you could share something about Canadians.
Well, Stephen, he was a leader of the National Citizens Coalition, which was an independent, nonpartisan group when I first got to meet him and work with him. And he was speaking out in Canada while Chrétien was prime minister, and they were certainly a left-of-center country at the time. And Stephen decided to run for the opposition at the time was the Canadian Alliance, and he decided to run for the leadership of that. And he says, he says to me, do you think I should run? There are single digits in the polls and over 10 million in debt. And I said, sure, because if you win, you're the leader of Her Majesty's opposition. And when they don't do well, you will become prime minister. And he actually figured a way to reinvent the Canadian Alliance and the Conservative Party so that there's now a very strong Conservative Party in Canada. And the one poll I did for him when when he'd lost the first election in 2004. And then he asked me to take a poll for him because he was thinking of stepping down as leader. And I did the poll, and I said, no, they like you. They just want to torture you and get to know you for a while. And that's the amazing thing is I only do polling in democratic countries where they don't shoot the pollster.
That's good. That's why you're around. So.
Right. And even then, I've had a lot of candidates where they've looked at the polls and they want to shoot the pollster. But he had lost. And I said, no, they like you. They really want you to run again. And the next time around, you will win. And that was the one poll I did for him. And we've been friends. At times I'll give him free advice. But he has a very good Canadian team that worked for him over the years. He was prime minister for 10 years, which is a long run in that kind of a system. So I used to kid him at the time because most of the time President Obama was our leader. And I used to say, Stephen, you are now the leader of the free world.
That's right.
And he did. He would speak out. Most Americans don't know him, but he would speak out on behalf of Canada, on behalf of Israel, on behalf of the NATO alliance.
He was a great friend.
Yes.
A great friend, a true friend. My guest this evening is none other than John McLaughlin, CEO of McLaughlin Associates, and, of course, the noted pollster, the noted and famous pollster and political strategist, and, of course, was one who worked for Donald Trump and had called that election before that incredible upset, before this tweet went out by the New York Times election night, where I'm looking at it now. We'll show it to the camera here. This is a historic tweet. This thing turned around in a matter of an hour or two. Unreal. Let me ask you a couple of final questions. You want to go on record with any predictions for 2020? Either is it gonna be a Mark Cuban versus Donald Trump?
I think Donald Trump. I mean, we have these. We're talking now, but in February we had poll numbers where Donald Trump had moved to a net positive position. We did a survey for SecureAmericanNow.org. Our friend Alan Roth runs that group, and the majority of Americans are getting the idea that this is a substantive man who's doing good things on security and trying on the economy. So I think Donald Trump is not a fluke. Donald Trump is somebody who got elected, he beat the odds, and now he's going to become a good president, where he will be a successful president. I will tell you, he will get reelected in 2020.
Wow.
And
on record. You heard it here first.
Right, exactly. He will get reelected because of the substance of his policies. He will get, if his tax cut program, his pro-growth economic program goes in as he basically, if the Republicans don't blow this, well, if they take his plan that he ran on and they put it into practice, the economy will grow. His security policies are already going to keep us safer. And I was talking about that February poll. For 4 years after President Obama got reelected, over 60% of all Americans for 4 years thought the country was on the wrong track. That's how we kept our majority in the House, got the Senate majority.
Right.
But as of last month, we had 41% saying right direction, 48 wrong track. So it's moving in the right direction. The optimism is real because people see real action and real substance. So
you touched on it before, John. How can a business benefit from polling data?
Well, the business, when you do the polling, I mean, the name of the game in politics is you have to get 50% or better usually. Yeah. So it's pretty tough. It's usually almost you win the election or you don't win the election.
Right.
And businesses, it's about trying to improve market share and it's trying to get information. So what you do is when you take a survey, you're looking at whether it's consumer attitudes, whether you're looking at brand attitudes, you're looking at things that would actually create a win situation for you, that people will buy your product, that they will succeed. So a lot of times we take surveys and they're very in-depth, and these surveys are not published because this is really important brand strategic information. They will take the survey, they will look at the strengths and weaknesses of the product. You'll identify a market, you'll identify the key segments that would maybe your customers. You'll identify issues related to specific products, specific brands that you might want to have. You'll also look at how to allocate resources. Virtually every survey we take, we'll ask people what social media they use most. We'll ask people how they get their information, how they make their decisions, who do they consult with. And then you develop some level of progress where you'll send some benchmarks and you'll say, this is a reasonable goal. for the business, and then most oftentimes they'll come back and do more surveys to see how they're moving their goals along. And for most businesses, there are very definite election days when people decide every day whether they're buying a product, when people decide every day basically if they're going to a business's website, if they're buying online, if they're going to whatever stores, et cetera, to make a decision. So that's on
the business side.
That's on the business side.
In the final 60 seconds, any takeaways for the listeners of Mind Your Business?
Takeaways? I tell you, you've been a great friend of mine,
Thank you.
I would listen. I learn from your show.
Thank you.
And your show is an educational experience in that usually you don't have political people, but you'll have business people. And you learn valuable things about how to conduct a business and how to you're in a way you're selling success.
Amazing.
And so I would.
What an endorsement!
I would say if you're a listener, keep listening. So.
77 WABC Radio presents Mind Your Business, hosted by founder and president of Bottom Line Marketing Group, Yitzchok Saftlas. Mind Your Business focuses on business and marketing strategies for success.